Jackal and Cinephiles, 90s Film Guru here. Thanks for joining me today. So I'm continuing on doing my list of my top 5 action films for particular action stars, and since I've done Schwarzenegger and Stallone, I have to do Bruce Willis. Because these three guys were the main action stars in the late 80s and the 90s, and I just thought it was really a great idea to sort of tackle his particular action films, which are very vastly different from Stallone's and Schwarzenegger's. So here's my top 5 favourite Bruce Willis performances and films. Number 5, Last Man Standing. Now, I think Willis is great in this. This is not his best performance and isn't his best film, but there's something about the 20s and 30s and the Prohibition era that he sort of suits. The way he wears suits and the hat and the guns and everything that he does in this particular film really suits him. In a lot of ways, he feels like a modern day Humphrey Bogart. Their careers were similar in a way, where they were both playing second fiddle to someone at the beginning in their career. Then there was one particular movie that really thrust them into the limelight, and then they started to do unique and interesting films along the way, even to the point that they both played mad scientists in different films. So it's kind of cool to see him in his element playing a sort of gangster or a gunslinger, or what do you want to call him. Because this film really is, even though it's in the Prohibition era, it's really a modern day Western. It was directed by Walter Hill. There's some issues behind the scenes, but it does feel a lot like the films he usually gives us. It's not his best film. And it was a remake of Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo, and also Sergio Leone's A Fistful of Dollars, a spaghetti western with Clint Eastwood. Willis plays John Smith, this gunslinger who gets stranded in this town where there's two sort of competing mobster groups, an Irish group and an Italian group. And it's really about how he starts playing both sides and ultimately gets mixed up in something that he can't control, and there are dire consequences to his actions. And it all unfolds from there. I just like his performance here. He suits the era, and the way he goes up against Christopher Walken, who plays another villain in the film, is kind of really cool, and to see them two on screen is interesting. Vastly different actors, but they work off each other really well. Willis has never looked cooler than he does in this film. His haircut, the suit he wears, his hat, the guns he has, just what he does in this film, he just is super cool and interesting, and that's why I kind of put him on my top 5. That's why I kind of put this film in my top 5, just because of how cool he is and how he sort of sums up that particular era and time and place. This film is just, if you like a good action movie, is worth watching, but it's also just for Bruce Willis and what he does in the film and how he sort of plays his gunslinger. It was really what draws people to the movie, in my opinion. So it's worth checking out if you haven't seen it. Number 4, The Jackal. Now, I know a lot of people don't like this and they don't like Bruce Willis's performance in it, but I really do. I think this is a really great film. What I love most about it is you've got a really solid cast surrounding Bruce Willis with Richard Gere and Sidney Poitier, Diane Venera. There's a variety of great supporting characters in the film that will add to it. Richard Gere is really great. It's probably one of his best performances. But what I love most about it is Willis in this film. He's playing this sort of killer that has to pretend to be different people throughout the movie, so he gets to play variations on that particular character in the changing of his hair colour, the way he speaks, the way he acts. I think this is a really good test for Willis as an actor. More than an action film, more than a sort of comical stuff that he's known for, this is sort of so different in the type of characters he usually plays, and that's why I love it so much. He's really great in it. It's the first time he's really played an open villain in the films. It's the first time he's really played an out-and-out villain, and I kind of love that. And I like his relationship and his on-screen chemistry with Richard Gere is really cool, and then they played great hero and villain, and I like that. But it really comes down to Willis and his performance here. He's really a cool character. He's able to do a variety of things that he hadn't done before, and it just shows him in a different light, in my opinion. That's why I really like this film. That's why I kind of like the film in general, but also because it's on my list, because I think what Bruce Willis does in it is really great, and it feels very refreshing in a lot of ways, more than other films he's done. You can really tell Willis is having a blast playing this character that's so refreshing for him, and I think he's up to the challenge, and I think he does a really wonderful job in the film. And this is definitely one of my favourite films. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Number 3, Last Boy Scout. Now I'm a big fan of this film for many reasons. Besides Bruce Willis, it's directed by the late great Tony Scott, who does a really wonderful job. It's very brutal in its violence that you don't see a lot, especially today, but in the 90s there wasn't as much brutality as we kind of see now. But this film really was quite brutal in its execution and the storyline that it had, and just the violence within the film. Once again, like I mentioned before, Bruce Willis has surrounded himself with some great actors in this film, and something about Willis playing a private detective that really works for me. He sort of suits it. It's because he has this old school look and feel about him, this old school vibe that sort of suits, much like what I said with Last Man Standing, it really suits a different era than what we see him in these days. And I kind of love that. And that's why it's kind of one of my favourite performances by him. And I really like that, you know, he has a sidekick sort of character with Damon Wayans, who was really to that point known for more comical films than he was action, but he really handles the action quite well, and he works off Willis quite well as well, and there's a really great bond between these two. That's sort of this whole buddy cop kind of concept, which I really love. Willis plays a disgraced Secret Service agent who ultimately becomes a private detective and gets sort of mixed up in something he can't quite comprehend. There is one thing too about this that Willis has always been really great at, and in particular in this film and in the Die Hard movies, is he's really good at playing an everyman in a lot of ways. He gets thrown into particular circumstances that he has to navigate through, but also he plays, he's really great at playing down on their luck type of characters. There's just something about the performances he gives that's very realistic. And his character here is definitely that. He's sort of lost faith in himself, he's in an unhappy marriage, his daughter hates him, and he's just sort of existing pretty much in the film, but it isn't until he's thrown into circumstances where he has to rise above that and become the hero, the everyman hero. And I love that, and that's another reason why I like this film. Is just what he does here, and the fact that he suits this particular character, down on a luck sort of character, but also a character that in a lot of ways feels and seems like kind of loser, but he kind of isn't. He's a likable loser that sort of has to stand up for himself. He has to stand up for what's right and do what he has to do. He has some great action sequences and some fight sequences, and just particular things that he sort of adds to this particular character in the movie is what I love most. And like I said, anything directed by Tony Scott in the 90s is usually a really great film. Okay, number 2, Fifth Element. This is Luc Besson's masterpiece, this space opera that is kind of feels like his own Star Wars in a way, and it's pretty much Die Hard in space. Bruce Willis pretty much plays a John McClane-esque character in this film, Corbin Dallas. He's a little different character, he's more in the military than the cops, but he drives a cab and then pretty much the whole plot and storyline falls into his lap with Lilu, played by Mila Jovovich, who just falls into his cab, and that starts the journey on it. But it's just the uniqueness, the French vibe, the stuff that Luc Besson adds to it that makes it sort of refreshing and interesting. And it's also like, Bruce Willis is really great because he plays an action hero pretty much in the film. But there are sort of variations in his ability to do different things in the movie. Like, yes, there is a whole action element. He does offer a lot of humour and is really cool in the film, but there's also this sort of love story and this sort of love that he has for Lilu and trying to show her that humanity is worth saving, and the bond that forms between them and the love that connects them is really great. In a lot of ways it feels like a Bond film as well, but it's just what Willis brings to it. He's not an everyman in here, he's actually an action hero. He's one of the very few actors who can portray an everyman and a hero, much like Kurt Russell. and he's just really great in it. I just love his action sequences, the way he handles himself in the film. The fact that it's this futuristic movie is really wonderful, and the type of film that Luc Besson crafts here is wonderful. And Willis is just great. He cements himself as one of the great action heroes and great action stars with this particular performance and this particular film. And most of the film you're with him, you're on board with him, and he's the standout. That is until Mila Jovovich appears playing Lilu. She absolutely steals the film in so many ways, in her innocence, in her action ability and fight, in her fighting style, in just the way she sees the world and experiences it. She doesn't let anyone mess with her. She takes control and makes a stand. She's super cool and super funny, super cute. There's so much about her is really great. And she just outshines everybody. But Willis is one of the very few characters in the film that's actually able to stand close to her and to sort of shine along with her, even though it's sort of billed as he's the hero and the main character is really her journey, and then the journey of both of them together. I just feel this is wonderful performance by Bruce Willis. He's fun and entertaining. He handles the action once again brilliantly, and he just creates another variation on the action character that he's known for playing, and he's just wonderful, and I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. Not only for Bruce Willis' performance, but also for what Luc Besson creates in this film. It's quite extraordinary in a lot of ways. Before I get on to my number one film, my top favourite film of his and his performance, there's some honourable mentions, some films I really put on the list that some of them, one of them doesn't really fit in the category of an action film. It's more of a disaster movie, but it still has action in it, so I've sort of put that as an honourable mention. So we've got Hudson Hawk. Now this is a film that Bruce Willis co-wrote that didn't do really well. There is a little bit of a cult following, but it's not a very popular movie. He does so much in here. He's able to sing, does comedy, does action. There's a lot of sort of great stuff he does in this film. The problem with the movie is it's very zany, and it just kind of, the zaniness takes away from the story they're trying to tell. But Willis is really fun in it, and you can tell he's having a blast with it and playing a character he really loves, and a character he really crafted himself, which is great to see. There's also Die Hard 2, not my favourite Die Hard film. I'm a fan of Rennie Harlin, and there's some aspects to the movie I do like what he does. It's pretty much a rehash of the first film. Instead of being in a tower, they're in an airport. But Willis is able to bring a bit more to the John McClane character here and sort of evolve him a little bit more, and we get another sort of fun aspect to him, and I think Willis is great in the film. The other film for me is Armageddon. Now, like I mentioned, it's more of a disaster film than an action, but I think Willis is really good in it. Now, there is a bit of controversy around this, The Kid, and a couple other films, because Willis was part of a movie that ultimately, because of issues with it, got cancelled, and he owed the studios 3 movies, and this is one of them. But it is still a really great film. Michael Bay's direction is a bit over the top and crazy at times, but it adds to it. And I think Willis is a really stern and strong and moral character here, and it feels a little different from other stuff he's played, which I really liked. Okay, my number one Bruce Willis film and performance is Die Hard 3, Die Hard with a Vengeance. Now, look, I know the original Die Hard is great, and it's an introduction to the character, and we get to see him as this everyman thrust into this difficult situation, which I really liked and thought was great. And it had a really good villain, Hans Gruber, played by Alan Rickman, who's wonderful in the movie. But there's just something about the third one I like more. I guess I probably watched this the most. It came out when I was sort of more aware of, I was a sort of a younger teen, I guess, when the third one came out, and I think I saw it at the cinema. So there's a connection there. Not that I dislike the other films, but it's just something about this film that I connect most to. And I really like what they did with the John McClane character. In the first film, you know, he's sort of having issues with his wife and trying to do the right thing by her. The second one, they do something similar. But the third feels kind of refreshing and original in a lot of ways. Him and his wife are separated. He's crawled into a bottle. When we first see him again, he's drunk, and he has to do this crazy thing in Harlem wearing this particular sandwich board that has something written on it that causes problems. So it's kind of like they kind of evolve him, and they set it in New York, which is really cool because the other two films have been set in different places, but this is where McClane sort of lives and has been a detective for so long, so it kind of adds a lot to the film in a lot of ways, which I really loved. And I think Willis is fantastic. Like I mentioned in Last Boy Scout, he's kind of like, down on his luck kind of character. He sort of gets once again thrust into circumstances that is difficult for him, but it's just about how he handles it, and it's just about how he rises to the occasion, and it just shows that John McClane is a really great character and action hero, but so is Bruce Willis. And this film, more than any other, and I mentioned this before with another film, really cements Bruce Willis as an action star, and this became a really successful film. And once again, he has a great supporting cast. I think Jeremy Irons is fantastic in the movie and a really great villain, the best villain we had since the first film with Alan Rickman's character. Jeremy Irons plays Simon Peter Gruber, and he's a really great villain. I just really love what he does in the film, and he's a great adversary for John McClane, and I think that's cool. And he has a plan that he sticks to, and it unfolds as he works towards his goals, and I like that. And the other thing too is Sam Jackson in this film. I think Samuel L. Jackson is really great. He plays Zeus. He isn't a sidekick character. Usually with McClane, there's a sidekick character. They introduce them and they're not as capable, or they sort of play second fiddle to McClane himself. Sam Jackson's character Zeus isn't like that. He's a character that is an equal. And it becomes sort of a buddy comedy, becomes sort of a buddy action film with these two. They both offer something different to dealing with the threat that they find that Simon has allowed to unfold. And they work really well together, and they work off each other really well. And Sam Jackson and Bruce Willis both did Pulp Fiction before this. And Pulp Fiction, there's an interview with Sam Jackson where he talks about Bruce talking about, like, yes, Pulp Fiction will really show your abilities as an actor, but Die Hard with a Vengeance will be a huge blockbuster and it will make you a movie star. And that's exactly what it did. I think this film opened so many doors for Sam Jackson, obviously also Pulp Fiction. And this was the film that sort of propelled him into the limelight a lot more, and allowed him to become the actor he's become today. And that's all because of the friendship between these two guys in real life, but also in the film itself. And I like how run down and gritty and bloody McClane is throughout the film. He's got a beard, he wears white clothes, so he gets blood on him. The whole ending, he has blood all up his arm and on his head, and he gets beaten up in the film, and he's able to be involved in car chases and action sequences. There's a lot happening in the film, and he really handles it really well. Like, there's a sequence on the train I really love where Simon's put a bomb on there and he has to find it, and how he does that. And just how sort of McClane's kind of relentless, trying to stop this bad guy from doing the things he's doing, and I really love that. There's just something about this film that really shines more than the other films he's done, and his performance here, and I really love this movie a lot. It's an action film I go back to, and if I'm going to watch a Die Hard film, it's either this or Die Hard 4, which is completely different, but in the original trilogy, this is the film I go to time and time again. There's some really great sequences in the film, robbing the bank, there's trucks in the aqueduct, which is a really cool scene. There's some really great car chases, and I think the third act and ending is really good when they're on the ship and how they get onto the ship, and just the things that unfold in that particular sequence I really love. Without Zeus in the film, I don't think McClane could have accomplished what he set out to do. In my opinion, this is up there as one of my favourite Bruce Willis performances, hence why it's number one on my list. And if you haven't seen it, or any of the Die Hard films, which would be unlikely, definitely worth your time. Anyway, that's it. That's my top 5 Bruce Willis action films. Some may agree or disagree. different take on which film you think's better, or opinion on what you think Bruce Willis's best performance is in the 90s, just put that in the comments below and let me know. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please subscribe down the bottom. Follow me on Letterboxd and Facebook. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movie.